And with an hour before the debate was due to start, we stepped out from the crypt. It was really dark in there. We stepped out and the light sort of blinded our faces, and we looked around and there was just a mass of people, and shops were closing around us and banks were closing. So we walked down the street and found out that London was pretty much being evacuated, and there were riots going on all around us. And we then spoke with the landlord of the building and had to face a big decision, and that was to cancel the debate and cancel the opening night to protect the safety of the 300 or so people coming along. So the exhibition still went ahead, and it pains me now to think that the opening night that was set up to be quite monumental in terms of discussing the future has had to be put on pause, but I'll return to that later. So moving quite swiftly on to the dilemmas of education, we hosted a debate called Education, a Charter for Change at the RIBA, and it was aimed to tackle the roots of qualification and studying architecture, and this might be something you're starting to explore now, being in architecture school and I guess some of you final years thinking about jobs next year. The idea of this debate was dreamt up in the shower. Some of our ideas just happen like that, and then we wake up the next day, email each other, and then say, why don't we do it? Again, we're very passionate about the shortcomings, supposed shortcomings, arguable shortcomings of the education system. Principally, everything affecting changes next year, rising university fees, the length of qualification, sorry, this year, not next year, the recognition of professional experience, which is starting to change now, but also the very strict routes to qualification, this idea that there has to be a parts 1, 2, and 3. But also the relationship between education and practice, the idea that a lot of us graduate after third year and still have very little understanding of what an architect does, but maybe that's the way it should be, maybe that should be questioned. So we thought we may as well debate it in a place like the RIBA. We thought rather than just debating notionally, we'd want to get suggestions out of it. So we set up a speaker's corner style heckling event where we enabled people to rant all they wanted, blame all they wanted, but they had to come up with suggestions as well. There are a lot of people that talk a lot and act very little, and we were keen to get them there coming up with suggestions that they were committed to take forward. We also negotiated this place for free. Part of our technique for negotiating the venue hire for free was that it would be on a Tuesday night. The RIBA happened to be open late on a Tuesday. There happened to be marking a closing of the Pavilion of Protest exhibition, which some of you may know about, that explored the expense of university fees. And we asked for measurable goals to take forward through a manifesto. There are a range of speakers. We wanted heads of schools of architecture talking alongside students, talking alongside practitioners, bloggers, journalists, and these are just a few of the speakers that then ended in a debate to come up and consolidate all these suggestions into 5 points that people voted on. The room could take around 80 people. We were expecting maybe 70 or 80, and 120 people squashed in at the back. Again, it was very overwhelming and very impressive to sort of realize that, again, there are these issues taking place and no forum for discussing the future. So we thought we'd play to Dan's strengths again. He gets sort of used a lot for his artistic abilities, and we asked him to do a live painting on the night, purely interpreting people's thoughts. So he was at the front with the drawing board, painting away, and this is what came up at the end of it. It was a charter for people to sign, a charter with all the suggestions and more that we could use to take forward. It was something physical and something to mark what was going to be more than just another debate. We also wanted to get the audience involved so that they felt part of the change, and they felt by signing up to it, they were keen to make the proposals reality. To be honest, I expected more to be discussed about fostering the value of history and context within education and then through into practice. I expected more to be discussed about the relationship between practice and education, as well as the social and economic value of architecture and the architect. That's something I found when I was studying I didn't question enough and value enough. But we got power in numbers. We got 120 people to sign the charter, and this charter can be signed virtually, which I'd invite every single one of you to do, if you can, through Facebook, through our Facebook page. We've used the charter to then start talking to people, start taking it forward, and in fact I think Simon heard about the charter and invited me to speak today because of it. We know we'll face resistance in these proposals. I should probably just talk about the proposals, sorry, go back one. One of them was to talk about more flexible ways of studying architecture, getting more credit-based learning, doing things that might not strictly be architectural, building boats for a day, sewing a dress and designing a dress, and having all of that be accounted for and count towards qualifying and learning about the role of the architect and the work of an architect, as well as incorporating knowledge from other professions. The professional experience recognition, the PEDRs that you may know of, is starting to incorporate work in engineering, for example, and work with that people can do with QSs also. But it's embracing that more so that there's a more holistic way of studying. There was a push for thesis projects to become reality after graduation, to turn them into live projects that can be executed, as well as the whole idea of low pay and the idea of increasing career prospects for architects, and so that any practice or anybody that employs and exploits their graduates by not paying them adequately, paying them less than minimum wage, should be struck off from the RIBA or any professional institutions that they're members of. And altogether, there was a push for a stronger student voice that was suggested by heads of schools of architecture. And that's something I think we take quite seriously, and something that's also an invitation for you today to think about as a school, and as a school with a very strong ambition. So once again, the What Now Collaborative was starting to clarify its aims, and we realised that through having propositions, we weren't just appreciating the past, appreciating the architect and the way things were, we were also raising awareness of it in order to take it forward and have very clear actions. And lastly, there's the whole dilemma of the built environment, probably something you might be exploring through your design projects. How does the role of the architect sit within the wider industry? And maybe as students now, you've been thinking about big ideas, thinking experimentally, thinking very much with a design focus, problem solving within design. But in a few months for the third years, and in a couple of years for the younger students, you'll be looking for Part 1 placements, applying for jobs. And I remember when I graduated and I started working on my first day, I didn't know what planners did. I didn't realise how much legislation needs to be abided by, and the whole idea of the duty of care of the architect. And these are the sorts of issues we're now coming to discuss with the collaborative. Things like, is an architect really necessary anymore to have a building built or projects delivered? Where does our role sit within the wider construction industry? Can design be so rationalised, so value engineered that it just almost disappears altogether? Do planners have too much control? How can individual projects sit within these large master plans for huge cities? It's also the idea of protection of buildings and seeing architecture as something that's a bit more organic, that can evolve. There's a whole debate after the Lloyd's building, it's only 25 years old, was listed a few weeks ago. Should more late 20th century buildings be listed? Big question. We then held a third debate that was called Plan, Non-Plan, the dilemma of development control. And this we aimed at just a few people, so it was held in a pub over ale tasting and in association with the ACA. We brought along students, architects, planners, and local residents, and wanted to keep the debate small. So wanted the people who were personally affected to share stories.